rolling flashbacks. You know, when I did my most recent YouTube live, somebody asked me if I could talk about rolling flashbacks. Here it is right here. And while I'm not surprised by that request, because I've gotten it from many people who visit my channel and talk to me in the chat or talk to me when I'm doing live videos, I was a little surprised that that term was brought up again, because there is no clinical terminology known as rolling flashbacks. And so what I did is I went through some of my previous videos and some of my clinical research, and I decided to pull that into today's video, which I'm going to talk about if I can say it, autobiographical memory. And basically what that is it's like a storybook memory. And what happens when you have had a traumatic experience is your brain kind of creates this comic book or this series of events or this what is it like? It's like a flipping book kind of a thing, you know? It causes your traumatic memories to kind of quickly, you know, go through each detail. And you might get fragments of information when your brain begins to process your previous trauma that way. It's like a storybook. We can call those rolling flashbacks. So I'm going to adopt that term for today's video, and I'm going to explain just a little bit about what you could be experiencing if you have family trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder. But before I do that, let me briefly introduce myself for those who are new. My name is Tamara, and I'm an internationally and board certified trauma therapist. I'm also licensed in mental health, and I specialize in treating children, teens, and families, as well as adults who are dealing with trauma. Let's go ahead and jump in. An autobiographical memory is something that we all experience. I talk a lot on this channel about the amygdala, the hippocampus, but let me briefly go over that with you just to kind of give you some foundation. Now, the amygdala is the emotional center of the brain, and what it does is it stores all of our emotional memories. That's why when you walk past a bakery or you hear jingling bells or you see a picture of something, you think of a holiday, you think of your Christmas, you think of your family gatherings, you know? Your amygdala stores those emotional memories and all the feel-good chemicals that goes along with that memory, the amygdala stores. Now, the hippocampus is the neighbor to the amygdala, and it is a partner to the amygdala. And what it does is it gives context to the amygdala. I talk a lot about this right up here in this video. If you want to check that out after this video, it gives that context to all the emotional memories that the amygdala grabs a hold of. Okay, so you need those two team players to really make sense out of your trauma. And sometimes when you have increased activity in the amygdala, you are getting flashbacks, you're getting fight or flight symptoms, you are feeling, as I always call it, central nervous system dominance, meaning your heart rate is up, your mind is racing, you may be sweating, you may be feeling dizzy, nauseous, nervous, anxious, all of that, right? Your body is telling you that you need to be on high alert. So you have increased activity in the amygdala. You have decreased activity in the hippocampus, which means that the hippocampus is unable to give you that context. It's unable to function in a way that's going to give meaning and context to those emotional memories that you're having. And decreased activity in the hippocampus says that you're incapable of drawing connections, of recognizing where you are in the here and now and giving context to those emotional memories. When that happens, you're likely to have flashbacks, and some people call them rolling flashbacks, as somebody on my channel called them. They are not called rolling flashbacks. There's no clinical term that regards flashbacks as rolling. Basically, you know, I think what this person may have been trying to get at is an autobiographical memory. That memory that you have, it's a memory that kind of goes like this in your head, right? Every time you're experiencing an emotional memory, this is what you get. This is what you get. So that's an autobiographical memory. And, you know, it's kind of taking your brain through all the previous trauma memories that you have fragmented inside of your brain. Okay. I think we need to regard flashbacks as, just for the purposes of this video, and this is the real clinical definition, but it's shortened, is a vivid memory that has many different components to it, okay? So it could be visual, it could be somatic, or it could be emotional. So let me explain. So a visual flashback may be something like, you go to a playground, and let's say you were abducted at that playground. You go to the playground, all of a sudden you're seeing that abuser who kidnapped you. You're seeing images and bits and pieces that are fragmented visually of what is happening. Now, some people may regard that as a hallucination. I totally disagree. I do not think that people with PTSD necessarily hallucinate or have visual hallucinations. What's happening is you're having a visual flashback and you're seeing maybe what happened to you in a traumatic fashion. There may be times where you start getting these visual flashbacks, almost like you're walking through a dream, if you begin to feel triggered in some way. It's not a hallucination per se. It doesn't mean you're psychotic or you have schizophrenia or you're delusional or anything. It just means you have been very traumatized and you tend to have visual flashbacks, okay? If this is you, you have visual flashbacks. Now, a visual flashback could also be, I saw a flash of light over there that took my mind back to a stage where I was left home alone for days in a snowstorm and had no one to rescue me, okay? That's another traumatic situation where a visual flashback can occur. Now, a somatic flashback is quite interesting. Research suggests that these particular flashbacks tend to involve the physical manifestations of the distress or the trauma that you were experiencing at the time. Let's say you were sexually abused, and there are times when you are trying to sleep and you literally feel your abuser's hand maybe touching you in places he should not, or snatching you by your hair, or yanking you by your coat collar, for example. Let's say that those are the somatic sensations that you are having. That's called a somatic flashback. You're feeling literally on your body what has happened to you in a traumatic way. The third kind of flashback that you could have, I'll call it that, is an emotional flashback. And that is basically what I talk about on this channel all the time. I talk about it right here in this video if you want to go back and check that video out. Emotional flashbacks are experiences where you actually feel emotionally as if you were back in that situation. Now, when the amygdala pulls those emotional memories into your realm of existence, and you smell something from a bakery and you think of your deceased mother or grandmother or your deceased aunt, the amygdala then is experiencing an emotional flashback, right? Because it's taking you emotionally back to where you used to be at the time of the trauma. What can these particular rolling flashbacks, or autobiographical flashbacks, I should say, what can these do to you? And what can visual, emotional, and somatic flashbacks do to you? Well, here's what you're likely to experience: self-injurious behaviors and suicidal ideations. Now, let me break this down. So there's a thing called non-suicidal self-injury. Here it is right here on the screen so you can see it. Non-suicidal self-injury. Basically what this is that you cut yourself, you burn yourself, you're very risky, you harm yourself in some way where it is noticeable, right? There's bruises, there's a concussion, there's broken bones, there's cutting, there's burning, there's marks all over your body, right? There's patches where you pulled out hair, or patches in your eyelashes or eyebrows, right? There's visual self-harm, but it is non-suicidal. So you don't want to die, you don't want to kill yourself, but you do hurt yourself almost to the point of potentially killing yourself, okay? Or harming yourself seriously. I have had individuals over my 14 years in the field, when I worked in a clinical community center, and then I also worked in a hospital with kids who were cutters, kids who burned themselves, the list goes on. I've seen in those settings, and over the past 14 years, there are some individuals who do not want to die, but they enjoy the process of harming themselves to the point of death, right? Getting this close to death satisfies them in some way. It's almost like you're trying to numb all the emotional and psychological pain by getting your injuries close enough to death that you could feel some kind of stimulation or impact. The next thing is self-injurious behaviors, meaning cutting, burning, you're harming yourself. You may also not have the intent to cut yourself, but you're still harming yourself in a way that could really get you in a lot of hot water, okay? There's suicidal ideation, where you're having suicidal thoughts and they may pass through your brain almost like a cloud, you know? Really what I look for in clinical settings when someone says I have suicidal thoughts all the time, what I'm looking for is, do you have some kind of learned helplessness where you feel like you can't get out because nothing has ever worked before for you? Or, you know, are you experiencing passive suicidal thoughts, meaning they pass through your brain and your mind like a cloud, but you'll never act on them, right? Or here's the third thing I look for, or are you having suicidal thoughts with a plan? Do you have a plan? I'm going to kill myself tomorrow at this time with this particular tool, pills, a gun, a knife, whatever. These are things that you could experience if you have unresolved childhood trauma and our made-up clinical word here, rolling flashbacks. Most individuals who have PTSD also have suicidal thoughts. They're also self-injurious, especially if they're not getting the proper treatment. So it's important to look at yourself and say, okay, wait a minute, I have PTSD. I also have urges to harm myself in some fashion. I do have suicidal thoughts. That means that I need to get help, okay? So those are a few things that you could experience. Now, another thing that you could experience is sleep paralysis, nightmares, night terrors, and also intrusive memories. Most people experience night terrors, nightmares, but sometimes they also experience intrusive memories right at bedtime, because that's when life calms down, that's when your brain can process things, and that's when you're able to kind of wind your body down for bedtime. The brain just starts shooting off with memories and thoughts and intrusive memories that maybe you don't even want to pay attention to, okay? So that's another thing you could experience. Fear of abandonment and developmental regression are also two things that you could experience if you're struggling with autobiographical memories or rolling flashbacks. Now, what I mean by this is, you know, you may fear losing something because you have lost in the past. You may fear losing something because the PTSD or trauma from your history is so intense, especially if it's childhood trauma, that you kind of hold on to everything with a tight grip. And so you may fear abandonment. You also may find that you are developmentally regressing. So the older you get, right, it doesn't really matter, and it doesn't really have an impact on your behavior because you're still regressed in some ways. You're still back at a particular age, possibly the age at which the trauma occurred, and you can't mature. You feel that you're behind your peers, so to speak. And that happens a lot with people who have unresolved trauma. Now, the last thing that I discuss with my clients and people who consult with me who are experiencing autobiographical memories or rolling flashbacks is rejection of painful reality. If you've experienced so much pain and trauma in the past, the last thing you want to do is experience more of that. And you may find yourself putting up defense mechanisms, right? Denial, sublimation, right? Displacement, reaction formation, blocking, stonewalling, gaslighting, right? You're putting up all those defense mechanisms because you want to reject the painful reality that you live in. These are all things, guys, that you could experience if you're struggling with rolling flashbacks, for example, or autobiographical memories and post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, I encourage you to go back and watch the video that I recently did on flashbacks. It gives you a little bit of information of what those consist of. A lot of people feel that, you know, I'm not having flashbacks. Okay, maybe not, but you could be having an autobiographical memory. Your brain could be going through all these different traumatic situations in a second. That's how fast they can go sometimes, like that book I showed you earlier. Or you may be having intrusive memories at bedtime or nightmares. So I encourage you to go back to that video and check it out. It might be helpful to you. Thank you so much for being with me today, guys. In this video, I encourage you to give it a thumbs up if it was helpful, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you want to stick around, and that bell button so you'll know every time I post a video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.